Welcome to Advancing Inclusion, DPI Resources to Enhance Your Practice. If you're ready to shape inclusive classrooms and schools where every learner can thrive, then you're in the right place. In this session, we'll explore DPI's resources for developing college and career-ready IEPs, co-teaching strategies, and tools for cultivating inclusive learning communities. This session is designed for educators, coaches, and school leaders. We will review practical resources and actionable takeaways to enhance outcomes for all learners. Today, we're going to be talking about resources to enhance inclusive practices. Specifically, we will explore the college and career-ready IEP process, co-teaching resources, and the inclusive learning communities practice profile. Inclusion as practice is about daily choices. It is an ongoing commitment, not a single event or a specific end to achieve. Practicing inclusion requires thoughtful decision-making about how plans, systems, and spaces are designed, as well as about how to approach human relationships while navigating those plans, systems, and spaces. That means that I'm not coming to you today with the answer. Rather, my intention is to provide you with an introduction to, or maybe a refresher on, some of the resources for inclusive practice available on the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction website. Throughout the session, you will be encouraged to capture your thinking about how these resources could fit into the conversations occurring in your school, district, or coaching practice. And we'll have time to consider possible action steps along the way. Let's get started. First, we'll establish a baseline and set a learning intention. Consider your knowledge of how the CCR IEP process, co-teaching, and inclusive learning communities practice profile can enhance your work with inclusive practices. So I know I'm asking you to think about three things at the same time, some of which you might have a different level of familiarity with. But just give it a try. Consider what you do know about those three resources and how they might enhance your work with inclusive practices. And referring to the slide here, consider which description most closely matches your starting point with respect to your experience with inclusive practices. Okay. So the first level, I've heard of the concept and want to learn more. You might think of that as the beginning level. Level 2 would be developing. I do not yet apply the concept. Level 3, applying. I apply the concept at a beginner to intermediate level. 4, I apply the concept at an advanced level. So you could consider that expanded application. And then that 5th level would be learning through leading. I'm an expert practitioner ready to coach others. So set a learning intention for this session based on your starting point. You're encouraged to take notes for your own learning at any point during the presentation today. This is something we'll be referring to later. You may be familiar with Dr. Shelley Moore's conceptualization of the evolution of inclusion, pictured on this slide. In a video about this, Dr. Moore describes the progression for students with disabilities in public education from exclusion to segregation to integration and then to inclusion. In this representation, students are depicted with multicolored dots. Notice that in the representation of inclusion, most of the dots are green. Dr. Moore explains that this is problematic because it feeds the myth of average. We know that each student is unique and that no two learner profiles are exactly alike. Dr. Moore asks, can we do better? Yes, we can. We can continue the evolution of inclusive practices by teaching to diversity. That depiction on the far right of the screen shows each dot as a different color, representing the unique students that you encounter every day. Of course, teaching to diversity is not a simple task. It requires highly trained educators who have access to a robust set of tools, as well as systems that allow for the flexible application of inclusive teaching practices and strategies within varied contexts. So let's investigate some of the tools at your disposal, starting with the College and Career Ready IEP process. We know that true college and career readiness is about much more than academics. Our graduates must also have the knowledge, skills, and habits that will allow them to succeed in life after high school. The information on this slide comes from the College and Career Ready IEP's overview webpage linked on the bottom of the slide. The CCR IEP process is guided by 5 beliefs and 5 steps. The text at the tops of each list is linked so that you can read more about each belief or step. The 5 beliefs are high expectations, culturally responsive practices, student relationships, family and community engagement, and collective responsibility. And the 5 steps, which we will go into in more detail, are understanding achievement, identifying the effects of the disability and disability-related needs, developing goals, aligning services, and analyzing progress. Here's another depiction of the CCR IEP 5-step process, which takes IEP teams through 5 interrelated requirements for IEP team meetings held for the purpose of developing or reviewing and revising a student's IEP. It begins at the top with understanding achievement, meaning that the team identifies the student's current levels of performance in relation to early childhood or grade level academic standards and functional expectations, using data from assessments or observations, progress reports, or any recent comprehensive special education evaluation and other information that the team has access to. The team includes information reflecting family and student voice, observations and viewpoints on strengths, interests, and areas of concern. Moving clockwise around the image, in step 2, the team identifies the effects of the student's disability so that they can pinpoint the disability-related needs that will allow for targeted goal development. At this step, it's important for the team to describe how the student's disability affects access, engagement, and progress in general education, and then to investigate further into why the effects make it difficult for the student to meet age or grade level standards and expectations. That's also known as root cause analysis. That information is synthesized to identify the student's disability-related needs. Step 3 is the stage at which the IEP team develops ambitious and achievable goals to address and support the unique strengths and educational needs of the student so that student can meet age and grade level standards and expectations. This is a good time to consider the core standards of the grade level so that the IEP can be designed for access to grade level content rather than focusing solely on unfinished learning, which does not allow the student to close the gap between their achievement and grade level expectations. In step 4, the IEP team aligns special education services with the student's disability-related needs and IEP goals. IEP services include supplementary aids and services, specially designed instruction, related services, and program modifications and supports for personnel. These services support student access, engagement, and progress in age or grade level standards-based curriculum and instruction, functional expectations, and other activities that occur across school settings. And then step 5, analyzing progress, is really a thread that runs through all of the other steps. It's a process that includes formative assessment and adjustment of instruction. The IEP team analyzes ongoing student IEP goal progress and service delivery to evaluate the effectiveness of the IEP in supporting student access, engagement, and progress toward age and grade level academic and functional skill standards and expectations, again, across school settings. Annual and interim IEP reviews help identify what is working and what may be needed to inform future IEP development. When an IEP team determines the student is not making sufficient progress, the entire CCR IEP 5-step process provides a good framework for reviewing and revising the IEP, right? You can go back to whichever step is the best starting place for problem solving what the team is noticing. Was it that we didn't have an accurate understanding of the student's achievement? Was it that perhaps we didn't identify all of the effects of the disability and the disability-related needs, or that the root cause analysis, maybe we should take a look again at some of the other things we were considering during that. So any step in that process could be helpful to the team to review and revise an IEP. On the CCR IEP 5-step process webpage, which is linked on a slide at the end of this section of the presentation, there's a link for each step. If you follow the link, the layout of the page includes an at-a-glance document for the step, a webinar, a slideshow with presentations, and handouts and other resources. The text boxes on this slide are linked to the at-a-glance documents, for each of the steps. One of the benefits of thinking about IEP meetings using these 5 steps is that it reminds us that this is not a new process. If these steps look familiar, it shouldn't be a surprise. This is the IEP as we've always known it. The 5 steps address the following IEP development questions. Do we understand the student's unique strengths and needs in relation to grade level academic and functional expectations? Have we identified how the student's disability affects access, engagement, and progress, and identified the student's unique disability-related needs? Based on those needs, did we develop specific, clear IEP goals that are ambitious and achievable? Are IEP services aligned to support goals and needs? And do we have a system to analyze progress throughout the duration of the IEP to identify what is working and what may need to change to improve access, engagement, and student progress in grade level content, instruction, and environments, so as to improve the students' outcomes? So pause and reflect here for a moment. How do these questions connect to the idea of enhancing inclusive practices? So anytime that I ask you to pause and reflect throughout this session, feel free to stop the recording and take whatever time you need to capture your thinking in whatever way works for you. So that could be a voice note or written notes. If you are viewing this with a colleague or a group, you may choose to have some discussion. Just find a way to record your thinking so that you can refer to it later. All right, before we engage in the first action planning step, let's pause to consider some of the ways that the CCRIP process can improve educator practice to enhance inclusive learning experiences for students with disabilities. I'm going to ask you to answer the question first, and then I'll share my answer. How can the CCRIEP process and 5 beliefs improve your practice to enhance inclusive learning experiences for students with disabilities? Take a moment to generate 1 or 2 ideas. Again, if you need to pause the recording, please do so. Now I'll share some additional ideas about how this question could be answered. The CCR IEP process focuses on the development of academic and functional proficiencies that allow students to demonstrate characteristics such as independence, self-determination, critical thinking, collaboration, leadership, creativity, responsibility, and persistence. Those sorts of things that will transfer across time and setting. Don't forget extracurriculars. This has been a hot topic with comments to DPI from families and educators feeling that IEPs sometimes do not really prepare for discussion and documentation of what's needed to ensure students have access to extracurricular activities, which is a legal requirement and a right of the student. The CCR IEP 5-step process emphasizes access and engagement within the least restrictive environment. During the CCR IEP process, teams consider what services would address IEP goals and disability-related needs that improve access, engagement, and progress in the regular education classroom. This involves really thinking about not just instruction through specially designed instruction and related services, but also thinking about accommodations and modifications, those supplementary aids and services that are documented in the IEP that can be provided in the regular education classroom. It can help the IEP team check any assumptions that specially designed instruction and related services means pull out into a non-regular education environment. That is not the intent of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. IDEA actually requires IEP teams to look at least restrictive environment, and instruction with general education peers is the strong preference in the law. The CCR IEP process can help local educational agencies to examine systems and explore if they're providing specially designed instruction and related services outside of regular education, because this is what we always do versus making individual decisions based on the unique needs of each child. The CCR IEP process supports inclusive practices by providing a framework for IEP teams to explore beliefs and attitudes regarding students with disabilities and to build knowledge and skills to evaluate and plan special education services in the least restrictive environment. Having conversations in general about the 5 beliefs, and if teams have high expectations for each and every student, regardless of the student's identified disability category or specific disability-related needs helps to build educator knowledge and skill for planning and evaluating special education services. When IEP teams use collective responsibility, then everyone is talking about student strengths, needs, and goals. This leads to teams identifying how they can support goals across all learning environments of the student through multiple roles. The goal is to prepare each student to have options for life after high school, including access to college, to career opportunities, and to community involvement. So now it's time to think about action. On the right side of this slide are all the links that were shared in this first part of the presentation. The CCR IEP 5 beliefs, the CCR IEP overview, and the CCR IEP 5-step process, which includes the at-a-glance document. Take some time to think about something you want to investigate further or bring to the attention of colleagues. Remember to consider your sphere of influence as you engage in this reflection. Keep it manageable based on your time, goals, and position within your organization. One of the goals of this session is for you to take away some achievable action steps. So awareness of the scope of your undertaking is definitely important here. Here are a couple of examples. You might decide to discuss with colleagues one step from the CCR IEP process that you would like to focus on improving as a team. Or you could have a conversation about how the CCR IEP 5 beliefs show up in your workplace. You might ask, like Dr. Moore does, can we do better? These ideas could also be utilized in the context of a collegial conversation, collaboration, or professional development. So take a couple minutes now to consider how these resources connect to improving inclusive learning experiences for students with disabilities. Then commit to your action step and record it. If you're watching this recording with colleagues, you could share your ideas in person. Otherwise, take some notes. Next, let's review some information related to co-teaching. The Co-Teaching in Wisconsin webpage, linked in the left text box, includes several learning modules. There's a Co-Teaching Foundations module, as well as a module for each of the core co-teaching competencies listed in the text box on the right of the slide. Each learning module outlines learning objectives and includes a slide presentation and presentation materials. There's a video of each slide presentation with recommended viewing times based on group size. The webpage also includes drop-downs with information about the definition and goals of co-teaching, a link to the co-teaching practice profile, and other related information. There's a lot of information to explore. So today, for the sake of time, I'm going to focus on some foundational definitions and the structure of the co-teaching practice profile. Let's start with some definitions. There are several terms defined in the co-teaching practice profile. Today, I want to highlight 3. It's important for educators to understand the differences between co-serving and co-teaching and how those two practices can work together. Co-serving is the practice in which educators collaborate, consult, co-plan, and reflect to meet the needs of all learners. This is important work. It's not co-teaching, but the elements are certainly embedded in the practice of co-teaching, and they're important for meeting the needs of students with disabilities, regardless of whether co-teaching is available. Co-teaching is the practice in which 2 licensed educators, often a special education teacher and a general education teacher, share equal responsibility for planning, delivering, evaluating instruction, and learning to meet the diverse needs of students in a shared space. So those parts about equal responsibility and shared space are key differences between co-teaching and co-serving. One of the reasons it's important to understand the difference between these 2 terms is that in Wisconsin, a co-teaching general education teacher can provide specially designed instruction to students with disabilities. For reasons related to licensing, this is only allowed in a co-teaching situation. If you want to learn more about that, check out the bulletin, What is Specially Designed Instruction and Who Can Provide It? It's linked on the last slide in this section of the presentation. All right, so I told you I wanted to go over 3 definitions, and on that last slide, there were only 2. Here's the third one. There's other supports that can occur with co-serving and co-teaching. Supportive facilitation involves another teacher or a provider of related services who supports or instructs an individual learner or small group of students within the general education classroom. The intent is not to provide core content, but to facilitate skills, interventions, or specially designed instruction. Related service staff also demonstrate how to embed accommodations or modifications within the setting in which they'll be used. The support of the additional staff person assumes their collaboration when planning the instructional period. And this information comes from the Florida Inclusion Network. So the co-teaching practice profile defines the essential attributes of an equitable co-taught learning environment. It outlines 4 core competencies to foster learning environments that are inclusive of every learner. Designing physical space and functional structures, planning learning experiences for all learners, delivering targeted individualized instruction, and assessing student learning and providing feedback. So let's get familiar with the layout of the co-teaching practice profile so that you can get a sense of how the structure can help co-teaching teams plan and stay accountable for their shared responsibilities. I tried to minimize the use of screenshots in this presentation in case some participants are using screen readers. So I recreated part of the profile and other resources that appear on some later slides. But then I realized that even this recreation can be challenging to navigate with a keyboard. So I want you to know that an e-reader version is available for each of the practice profiles I'm going to talk about in this presentation. This one, the co-teaching practice profile, can be accessed on the Co-Teaching in Wisconsin webpage. That's linked on the next slide, which is slide 16. This practice profile document aims to provide both educators and leaders a framework to promote and support inclusive and equitable co-taught classrooms. This slide is an example of the practice profile layout. Okay, across the top of the table is an explanation of how the competency contributes to co-teaching practice. And the competency is listed in the left column. And then for each competency, there's an explanation of evidence that would indicate expected use of the competency in practice or developmental use or unacceptable use of the competency in practice. So take a moment to review the 3 indicator levels and think about how they could be used for goal setting and continuous improvement of co-teaching practice. What would you expect to notice for evidence of expected use in practice? Here's another opportunity to pause the recording and take some notes or discuss with nearby colleagues. Okay, on the right side of the slide are all the links that were shared related to co-teaching. The Co-Teaching in Wisconsin website, the co-teaching practice profile, Florida Inclusion Network website, and what is specially designed instruction and who can provide it. Once again, this is a time to consider what you would like to investigate further or share with colleagues. Keep it simple, right? Steady small steps can have big outcomes. So here are a couple of examples of follow-up actions. You could review the practice indicators in the co-teaching practice profile with your co-teaching partner or supervisor. Assess your current use and practice and set an attainable goal for improvement in one area. You could plan time to engage with the learning modules on the Co-Teaching Wisconsin webpage, either by yourself or with a group. Or maybe you decide you want to meet with a colleague or a small group to discuss the definitions of co-teaching, co-serving, and supportive facilitation. Identify examples of these practices occurring in your school or district. Ask, can we do better? Take a couple of minutes now to think about how else this framework connects to improving inclusive learning experiences for students with disabilities. Commit to your action step and record it. Our last set of resources for today focuses on fostering inclusive learning communities. The Inclusive Learning Communities Practice Profile describes the essential attributes of a learning environment that is inclusive of teachers and learners. This practice profile document aims to provide both educators and leaders a framework to promote and support inclusive classrooms, schools, and programs. You can access the Inclusive Learning Communities Practice Profile on the webpage, What are Inclusive Learning Communities? And that will be linked on the last slide in this section. So let's get familiar with the design of this resource. The information on the slide is from the Co-Teaching Foundations module. It provides an overview of the competencies in the Inclusive Learning Communities Practice Profile: professional collaboration, inclusive mindsets, learning culture, climate, and relationships, planning and facilitation, authentic learner engagement. Like the co-teaching practice profile, the inclusive learning communities practice profile is available in both a table version and an e-reader version. You can access this inclusive learning communities practice profile on the web page, What are Inclusive Learning Communities? That's linked on the slide at the end of this section. This tool can inform educator practice. As educators build reflection into their daily practice, the Inclusive Learning Communities practice profile can help identify areas of strength and need for teachers and also promote goal setting in a specific competency. So as we did with the co-teaching practice profile, I want to have you become familiar with the layout of the Inclusive Learning Communities practice profile, but I really couldn't fit it all on the page here, so I'm actually going to stop sharing for a minute. Are you kidding me?